my gosh, we have 40 participants.
Hi everybody, this is Bryn. I'll be your host today. We're just waiting for a few people to go in the room before we start. So I hope everybody's having a great time. I hope everybody is having a nice morning so far. So yeah, we'll be starting shortly. Okay, so I think we can start now. Okay. So hi everyone, welcome to Develop's Tech Talks. We are excited to host Irish Danielle Morales for their talk, I Can't Code, today. We started our Student Tech Talk series in the past months to shed more light on the work and journeys of students from all around the country. We hope that in these conversations, we foster community, empower peers, and showcase the breadth of skills and diversity among high school and college students around us. Students are the face of creation and are changing the world every day. And this has been especially exemplified in times of crisis when they are some of the first to rise. So Develop is a nonprofit based in Manila accelerating technology and experiences for social good. We uplift student founders and creation working for social impact. You can learn more about us at develop.org and at our Facebook group. To plug, we're also working on a campaign to provide Filipino students access to tech devices they need for schooling at nostudentleft.com. We'd love for you to join us. So to introduce our speaker, Irish Danielle Morales, a.k.a. Ace, has forgotten how to talk to people since quarantine started. Actually, same. They still sleep with a stuffed toy they've had since they were 3. While in quarantine, they also do art commissions to raise money against causes of injustice. When not pretending to be in a Broadway musical, Ace is a student activist, a roboticist, and the first Filipino Grand Prize winner of Google Code in the 8 years since it was first held. Despite never having a single programming class in junior high school, they've taught students and teachers alike in robotics programming workshops across CALABARZON, won numerous robotics competitions here and abroad, and led an internationally award-winning robotics team as president. They are currently a scholar and incoming freshman at Ateneo de Manila University under BS/MS Computer Science. As an artist, they also create art for action with Panday Singing and Youth Rights PH. They believe that art and technology are both tools of creation and hope to use these as platforms to inspire and incite change. So, Irish, are you ready?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm giving it up to Irish. Good luck.
Thank you. So first I'd like to thank everyone here because some people, I'm seriously surprised at how many people are here. Some of the people here I've done robotics yet. Some of the people here I've been in CADs in the SU with. And some of the people here I've just sent memes over the internet with, and I haven't actually met any of you, but I will one day. And I'm just really thankful to everyone that is here because I was really surprised. And if I haven't replied to your messages or your posts yet, I deeply apologize. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So yeah, this tech talk is called I Can Code. And my name is Danielle Morales. I used to join in these Zoombot competitions. So if you know those Japanese sumo wrestler guys, these guys, right? So we took those guys and then we made them robots. We called them Zoomobot, right? And then just like in sumo wrestling, we have a ring, and then what they do in Zoombot is that we have to push each other out of the ring. So we have to make the opponent robot fall over, and here's a nice little animation for that. It took a lot of work, honestly. And here's an actual video of a Zoombot competition. So what you're seeing here is that these two robots are trying to find each other on the ring, and they're trying to push each other off the ring. And I have my Zoombot right here. And as you can imagine, in Zoombot, you need to have better hardware, right? You need to have strong wheels that can grip onto the ring. You need to have good motors to, of course, drive the wheels. This thing in the front, it's called a scoop, and it basically has to touch the bottom of the ring so that the opponent doesn't just scoop you up. And then you need to have a strong battery, the yellow thing here, if you can see it. And then you need to have sensors, of course. It's this thing at the front, this thing. It has sensors all over, basically. And when I first entered Zoombot competitions, I did not have that upgraded robot. I did not have better wheels, better motors, better anything. So if you think about it, it was kind of like I had a level 1 robot with starting equipment and like a stick for weapon, if you can imagine that. I had a level 1 robot against opponents whose wheels could be heard from the other side of the ballroom. Like, I call it the ballroom because the venue was about as big as a ballroom. And if you can imagine that you could hear the motors on the other side, that's how terrifying their robots were. So if I try to turn on this Zoombot right now, you can see that, yeah, this one, each of these white things is a program. Now, because my robot wasn't upgraded at all, it was a level 1 robot, what I did was I changed the only thing that I could change for free, which was the programs. I made 9 programs. And for reference in Zoombot, people usually do like 1, or sometimes there's people with like 3 or 2 programs. But generally, people just have 1 program, right? So I came in with my level 1 robot and 9 programs, and then I had a program like this. So what you can see here is that my robot is actually moving back when the opponent robot is in front. Now, what it was supposed to do is that it was supposed to dodge if the enemy robot was in front, and it was supposed to attack you from the side in a way. And somehow this one won, but this was also the peak example of a program that you shouldn't do when you're in Zoombot. Because what you can do is that you can just move backward until you fall off the ring. And when I show this to people, people somehow expect me to say that I won with this level 1 robot and like 9 programs. That did not happen, right? I failed, and I failed so miserably that the global director of the World Robot Games, he stood next to me and he asked me, why did I program my robot to be like that? He asked me why I programmed my robot to be so slow. He asked me why I programmed my, well, sort of fall off the ring in a way. And imagine failing so badly that this big dude just asked you why you decided to do that, right? So I decided to work on my robot again. And I looked up some videos from the internet of how people program their robots in Zoombot. And I tried to copy this one, where what you can see here is the yellow robot is sort of dodging when they're in headlock. I tried to copy this one, it's called like a search and destroy program where you basically find the other robot. And I tried this one. You just have to see what happened there. And so I went from 9 programs and a level 1 robot to 12 programs that now actually worked, but still having a level 1 robot. And somehow, by some miracle, I finally won with that. So in another year, 2018, I joined something called Google Code-In. And in Google Code-In, you try to do as many tasks as you can while like maintaining the quality of it. And here's a disclaimer. Here are some badly made apps up ahead. These are apps made in like 2 days or something. So forgive them for being so terrible. Here's something called Food Have Feelings Too. It's basically cheap, but food. We have a pet taco or a pet pizza. Here, my pet taco, taco de taco, because I am very creative. And I'm feeding my pet. I'm petting my pet. Can I be heard properly? Okay, thank you. I'm feeding my pet, I'm petting my pet. And if you basically fail to take care of your taco, then it dies. And then you get a sad little game over screen, right? And then there's this other app I made called Evermath, which is, it's basically a space shooter, but math, very, very creative. Wow. It's like you have monsters coming down from the screen, and these monsters are equations. And you have to answer with fractions or decimals because the challenge was to make an educational app that could teach fractions and decimals and stuff like that. And you have a health bar and a score bar, and you have some bigger enemies. And if you let them go by, if you let too many equations go unsolved, then you get a game over screen. Here's the next one. It's called Filtra. It's probably my personal favorite. It's kind of like Snapchat. You're basically making Snapchat filters. And it's very, very simple, very, very limited, but it has facial recognition. And then you have stuff like trying to make it fit on your face or something, stuff like that. And there were tons of these. These weren't the only tasks. There were stuff like research writing, design, programming, all of those. In total, I did more than 30 tasks in 3 months. And each task took, I don't know, maybe 2 days up to a week, something like that. And eventually, these are very like low, they're very bad apps. But somehow, they did get me to Google. It's like a free trip with like free airfare. And I'm kind of flexing here, I know. But a lot of the people watching this are probably here for that. So I thought I might as well put it in. So why am I telling you this in a talk called I Can't Code? Well, at the same time that I was doing Google Code-In, I was also taking my first and my only formal programming class. And by formal programming, I mean part of my K-12 education. A lot of us there will only have maybe like 2 or 3 formal programming classes, because apparently that's how our curriculum works. And at the same time as I was competing in Google Code-In, I was teaching my friends programming. And from that, and from teaching robotics programming workshops, I got this question in my mind that I still have up to this day. And it is, why does a tech fluent generation lack basic coding skills? This is a question that I want you to ask yourself. Why is it that very few people code, despite the fact that we are a tech fluent generation? We are a generation that basically generations before us how tech works, and yet at the same time we're also learning from some of the generations before us. So I used to have this quiz in statistics on online classes, which you probably know what log O that is. And I made a script to solve my quizzes for me because I was very lazy. And it's no different from using a calculator or Microsoft Excel, if you think about it. So it's not cheating, right? Because we were allowed to use calculators. It's not cheating. I swear it isn't. And why is it that when I tell people this, people seem impressed for some reason? It's no different from entering these numbers in a calculator. In a calculator, you have a formula, you plug in your numbers, then you press equal sign, you get your answer. MS Excel, you enter the formula, get your answer. And it's not an issue with logic either, because by the time we're high school, we all know how basic algebra works. We know how something like x plus 5 equals 13 works, right? And programming is just that. We just have variables, we just plug them in with values, and out comes the answer. Why is it that if you ask someone to solve this on a calculator, it's easy, but if you ask someone to code this, they'll look at you funny? This is a question that I want you to ask yourself, because I'll be going to this, I'll be going back to this near the end of the talk. If coding is seen as something you do only as a tech course, only if you're going to take a tech course, then that sort of heightens the technology gap, doesn't it? Here's another story. So I used to have a student. They were 6 years old, and let's call them kiddo, right? So little kiddo once told me, I want to be an inventor one day. So I asked little kiddo, what are you going to invent? And kiddo told me, I want to make robots. And so I said, what kind of robots? And little kiddo said, I'm gonna make a robot dog, and I wanna make dinosaur robots. And then I'm going to make a robot to do my math homework for me. I'm gonna make dancing robots, all those stuff, because you know how talkative kids are. And I brought my little robot called Ozo. Here it is. So this is Ozo, and I brought this robot over to kiddo, and Ozo is a little line tracing robot.
Introduce your kids to the world of programming and coding with Ozobot. Your kids will use their imagination to play and create fun games and challenging activities that will enhance their logical reasoning. Ozobot is designed to recognize colors as well as different color sequences on both paper and your favorite digital surfaces that are iOS or Android compatible. For example, when I draw a red line, Ozobot will recognize that color and turn red. The same happens when it recognizes blue or green colors. Now, when I take those colors and place them in different sequences, it tells Ozobot to perform specific commands such as slow down, speed up, or spin. Here is an example of a U-turn code. In the app, it is as simple as dragging and dropping codes to the play area. Ozobot also has the ability to recognize both flash and static codes on digital surfaces. Find a full list of color codes online.
So here was the short demo of Ozo. So as you can see, Ozo is a line tracing robot. It's this small, and it has little color codes that it can follow. It can dance, it can, speed up, slow down, stuff like that. Now, kiddo was really, really very excited about this. And there's this one word, actually, that kiddo told me that really impacted me. It's in this conversation, actually. You can probably find out what it is. When little kiddo found out about Ozo, he put it on his math worksheets, and then he was putting it on the lines between tiles, and then he would follow it around, and then he would be running around the entire center, just chasing a tiny robot like this. And while he was very excited about Ozo, he told me, I want to be an inventor one day. The key word here is inventor. Kiddo is 6 years old. I did not give him that word. I did not teach him that word. He gave that word to me. And This is an actual drawing that my friend sent me. Because at one point, we were all kiddos, weren't we? At one point, we all wanted to be an inventor, as little kiddo told me. Not just in robotics. Some of us wanted to be artists. Some of us wanted to be musicians, authors, inventors, stuff like that. And so, if you're an artist, you're an inventor. If you are a roboticist, you are an inventor. If you are a programmer, you are an inventor. You're inventing different things in different ways, but you are still an inventor. So then it should follow that programming is an art and a science. And this is something that programmers already know, apparently, after a few years of programming. But when you're new to programming and you've only taken like 1 or 2 classes, this is like a big question. Like, how are these boring lines of code? How are they art, right? So let me show you something. This probably should look familiar. And this is actual working code. If we run it and see what happens, it looks something like this. So surprise, it is Flappy Bird from Flappy Bird looking code. Let me show you something else. This is an actual programming language. It's called emoji code. And this is actual working code again. This next one, this is a program. This is a programming language, actually. It's called Shakespeare Programming Language. And this isn't a play, this is actual working code. If you try to run this, you get, it literally just prints 2 letters, H and E. The H is from the Hamlet, the E is from Exit Romeo. This next one, it looks like nothing. But if you try to highlight it, this isn't white text. This is spaces and tabs. And this is an actual programming language called whitespace. It's very useless, but it exists. And this is, again, actual working code. If you try to run this, you get hello world, surprise. And they're all very useless, right? But they're fun to make. And as Oscar Wilde puts it, all art is quite useless. It's half true, half not. But it's undeniable at this point that programming is a kind of art in its own way. If you remember the title slide of this presentation from I Can't Code, this is where it came from. This is ASCII art text generator. And basically you enter text, you get different kinds of ASCII art. This was made sometime in the 90s. There's this thing called code poetry. And on the right side, you can see poems inside of code. And if you run that code on the right side, you get what you see on the left side. It's printing Sakura trees and stuff like that. So it's kind of art, kind of programming. There's this last thing that.
What are you doing?
I don't want to be honest with you.
You don't have to be a doctor.
I'm not sure. I don't know what you're talking about.
I want to see you too.
What do you mean?
I'm sure you wouldn't even touch me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Principle is completely constructed of the same time.
It's all about you to be true.
You didn't even watch the movie with the rest of the base.
I don't know.
I don't care.
I know. It's a consequence. Whatever you need to know about the presence of the story, I'm a little bit of a boy on the floor.
I don't know. I need you to explain to me what you say.
What do you mean?
Because I don't know what you're talking about.
That was all the time.
Would have been a good time. I think I could have been my life. It may never be forgiven. I'm not free of the world.
Yes, perhaps I should take it from here. I'm not going to do something.
It's not a dream, but I've got a time to stay there.
Well, I still think you could be back on the table.
It's a damn thing scared to say. Nothing is going to be a thing, but I'm the one who got on this rock with a child, and then I left the other two.
That's Sunspring. It's a short film written entirely by an AI that was trained on sci-fi movies, and they basically made a short film out of the screenplay it wrote. It's pretty meaningless, but it's 10 minutes. It's worth your time. And I made something called, it's a small little card site that compiles all of the resources in this talk in case you want to play with them. You can actually look it up right now. And I think at this point, I've probably made it clear that programming is an art. So where's the science part, right? In any other science, if you think about it, any other science is sort of top-down. So for example, we take a flower, right? We go into the parts of a flower, we go into a plant cell, we go into leaf anatomy, we go into chloroplast. So what we're doing is we're starting from something that's common in nature, something you can commonly see, and then we're zooming into its parts in order to understand it more and more. Computer science is the opposite. We're looking at something that we make. We're looking at transistors, and from transistors, we went to logic gates. Logic gates to ICs, ICs to CPU, ALU, which is called von Neumann architecture. I'm not sure if I'm reading it right. From von Neumann architecture, we went to binary, the zeros and ones you see in Hollywood or something. We went to assembly code. We went to programming languages. Programming languages is where we'll start, and it's why we don't see a lot of the magic of computer science, because a lot of it is sort of behind the curtain, right? And then after programming languages, we made operating systems like Windows, Mac, Linux, stuff like that. We made applications, and that is sort of like the top tier, but we're always building on that. So if you think about it, any other science sort of zooms in on life, and computer science sort of zooms out. We're making all these operating systems, we're making all these programs, stuff like that. But at the same time, we're also making our own problems. And there's this quote from Bill Gates. The computer was born to solve problems that did not exist before. Because when we made the computer, we also made a bunch of programs. And now it's our problem to solve it, because, I don't know, the nerds are weird that way. So again, programming is an art and a science. We study existing rules, that's sort of the science part, to bring something into existence. That's sort of the art part. And here's where the way we teach technology can sometimes come short. In our classrooms, programming is seen as a science. And not just inside of the classrooms, actually. In general, non-programmers see programming just as a science. So what do I mean by this? For example, you have, I don't know, a quiz in biology, stuff like that. And then you memorize all the terms. You understand how the processes work, and then you know the functions of each part. And then that's basically it. You're not allowed to mix up those terms. You're not allowed to mix up those functions, those organs, because it's something pre-existing. In programming, you do have rules to follow. If you say print hello world, you have a syntax to follow, and you can't mix that up. But when you're making your own programs, you have building blocks. These lines are just building blocks, and you have rules to follow, and you're supposed to place the blocks according to those rules, but ultimately you're creating something new. And so, because we see programming too much as a science, we know how lines work, but not how the lines work together. And this is especially common in a lot of beginner programming classes. You know how something like print works. They know how something like, INTX works. But if you try to put them together, something like string my string, then print my string, people are just kind of confused. Another thing that makes programming very different is that trial and error in programming is different from trial and error in other subjects. What does that mean? In other subjects, you have a quiz, you're given an assessment, and you get a wrong answer, you're given an X. You have a lower score by 1. You can't change your answer and take that back and get a higher score. In programming, you get an error, and you're free to rewrite your code as many times as you want. But for a beginner who's used to doing quizzes and assessments their entire life, who has, sort of like errors in their quizzes that they can't take back, they get frustrated because it feels like they can't change that. And that's why we have this sort of joke in programming. Like, if your code executes with 0 errors, you should be terrified. And any experienced programmer knows that. But for a beginner, it's actually 96% upvoted, which probably says something. And for a beginner, if you get 0 errors the first time you run it, you're ecstatic. And there's a little comment here. You can tell how experienced someone is in programming by their reaction to an errorless first attempt. Because if you don't get an error on the first try, that probably means that you screwed up somewhere, and you screwed up so badly that the computer doesn't know where you screwed up. And here's another thing. In other subjects, a teacher points out when something is wrong. A teacher points out how to fix it. In programming, a compiler points out when something is wrong, and Stack Overflow points out how to fix it. We literally just look up the answers to our problems. We have an error message, we look that up on Stack Overflow, we copy the answer or something, or we try to understand it. And that's probably the reason why programming is more self-taught than other subjects. I have to put usually here because sometimes you also mess up and the compiler doesn't know why, and you're just both staring at each other terrified. And this is from the Stack Overflow 2019 survey, that 85% of programmers taught themselves something, because programmers are very self-taught in general. And this is kind of like the projects that I made for Google Code a while ago. They're made based off knowledge that is completely self-taught. And here lies the question that, how do we introduce an introductory high school programming class with a subject that is unlike any other that we've seen before? How do you teach programming to someone who's used to like all these other subjects and someone who will bring all these other approaches into programming? The answer in that lies in the question that I gave you earlier. Why does a tech-fluent generation lack basic coding skills? And the answer to this has already been said. It's actually the entire thing I've been repeating this entire talk. Majority lack basic coding skills because we fail to see programming as an art and a science, which is why people don't see it as a hobby, an act of creation. People just see it as something you do for school or something as a requirement or something. We create rather than comply when you're a programmer that does it for fun. But if you're learning it from school, sometimes it comes off the wrong way. And it comes off as something that you just kind of have to do. And you don't really know what you can do with this because it's just taught to you. So this idea, the idea that programming is an art and a science, this is the idea that we need to teach. We need to teach the how and the why. We need to teach the philosophy and the practice. We need to teach the philo, the Greek for love, and the sophos, the Greek for wisdom. We need to teach the love for wisdom, the love for creation. And whether you're a student or an educator, that is the ultimate goal of education, to love wisdom, to learn to love wisdom. So whether, again, if you are an artist, you are an inventor. If you are a roboticist, you are an inventor. If you are a programmer, you are an inventor. If you are anything else, if you are a content creator, a gamer who streams their games or something, an author, a playwright, you are an inventor. You are creating something that has never happened anywhere else in human history. Even if it's something as simple as a Hello World program, something that's been done millions and millions of times before. This creation is your own. It is unique to you. It is personal to you. This is a creation that has never happened anywhere else in its exact form in human history, and you are the one to bring it into existence. And funnily enough, it was a student who taught me this. It was a 6-year-old kid that I like to call kiddo who taught me this word, inventor. We are all inventors in a way. And I'm nearing the end of my talk, actually. So here's a quote from Donald Dutt. Science is what we understand well enough to explain to a computer. Art, anything else. And that was from Donald Knuth, the author of The Art of Computer Programming and one of the foremost figures in science. That's all I really have to say. Thank you so much for being here. Here are some other resources, by the way, if anyone wants to check them out. I have them on the artxtech.car.co, that thing that I put up a while ago. And Develop was nice enough to put that up on the description and the comments. That's all.
Do you guys have any questions for Irish? You can send it to the link that she has sent. Yeah.
And thank you so much, Irish, for such an amazing talk.
Thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, programming, it really is an art. And I think a lot of people forget that. But yeah, if anyone has questions, feel free to ask in the Polab, or you can also just type it in the chat and we can go to it. Also, feel free to turn on your video, I guess.
Also, I can see everyone's messages the entire time. I just couldn't reply because that stops the video. So yeah.
Okay, we have a question here. So it asks rather, what's a good language to learn as a beginner?
Well, for me personally, I started with the worst possible programming language to start with as a beginner, which was C++, which is a terrible, terrible choice. It's probably not the worst, but it's terrible. And for beginners, you might want to go for something called a high-level programming language. Like, for example, the most common is Python. Some others learn with Java. But generally, you want to go for a high-level programming language that will sort of be more human readable.
I see. Okay, so we have another question. It asks, who are your biggest inspirations?
Why is this a question? Okay. I've always actually had a sort of fascination for the figures in computer science, and if you could actually look them up. I think my biggest inspirations would be Ada Lovelace and Alan Turing, the father of computer science.
Okay, that's actually great. Yeah. We have another question. Oh, I asked this quite a lot to my friends, so who are also computer science majors. So I guess people are also interested to know about this. So the question is, Should one be extremely good in math to major in computer science?
Well, I am terrible at math, but I'm still taking computer science. And it's also something that I've personally looked up on Google like 100 times. It's computer science is a very math heavy course, but depending on some schools, Hans, you are lying. Depending on some schools will focus more on the theory, and some schools will focus more on the practice. It's a bit more math related, but generally, if you have the drive and the passion to pursue computer science, and if you are confident in your logic skills, or if you're willing to work on your logic skills, then by all means, you definitely should take computer science.
Okay, so we have another one. What competitions, initiatives, or opportunities really helped you grow as a coder, and which of these do you suggest to people starting out or getting back into code?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite hear
Okay,
it.
so what competitions, initiatives, or opportunities really helped you grow as a coder, and which of these do you suggest to people starting out or getting back into code?
Personally, the way that I learned programming was from having an amazing robotics team, an amazing environment where everyone was so eager to do programming and robotics. Everyone was so eager to learn about technology. And when we started, we started from sort of nothing. Even our coaches, they were learning with us because we were sort of kind of starting another robotics team in a way. And for other people, I would suggest that maybe you could do the same, right? Maybe you could try to find a community that will encourage you to do code. And sometimes for others, it's an online community. For others, it's their friends and their peers. Sometimes it's people that you have to approach. Yeah, people like develop. So my general advice is that if you want to get into code, first of all, you have to, of course, have the drive to do that. And for me, that was the community that my robotics team had. The community of having people around you that were very excited about technology, and their excitement is infectious, and hopefully you can find a community like that for yourself too.
That's very interesting. That's a wonderful answer. So we have another question. How do you conceptualize projects when you're trying to learn a new language or framework?
Well, there's this pretty big concept in computer science that's called modularization. Yes, modularization. Well, it's basically you're trying to break it up into smaller parts. Because if you look at this new framework, this new technology that you're looking at, it's pretty overwhelming to look at. And you have to break it up into smaller parts, and you have to tackle them part by part. So if for example, I'm looking at a framework that's kind of familiar with something I've done before, I sort of focus on the part that I'm more familiar with. And then I go step by step until I go into these parts that I'm less familiar with, and I try to work on those as well.
Okay, so I guess we'll take our last question here. So it asks, should programming be introduced at an early age?
As much as possible, yes. It's no different from any other hobby in a way, that people look at programming like it's something intimidating, but just like they go ahead with, little 6-year-old kiddo a while ago, people have an interest to be an inventor at an early age. And we need to sort of foster that interest, especially as educators who want to teach the love of wisdom. We need to teach people that they need to hold on this interest, that they need this interest to be sort of protected. There's a word for it in pedagogy, but I've forgotten the name for it. And I understand that in the Philippines, however, we don't have that much opportunities in a way, because in other countries, for example, they have programming classes in elementary, or they have stuff like Ozo, these little robots that can help people learn how to code. And we don't have those elementary programming classes, and robots are kind of a rare thing around us, or at least there's not much people creating these small robots that are directed towards children in the Philippines compared to other countries. But we do have a lot of access to online resources that are made free for the World Wide Web to see. So for example, stuff like Scratch, stuff like Blockly. And those are actually projects that my former robotics coaches are working on right now. They're teaching young children to code using these Blockly apps and something called iCode, I believe. So as much as possible, we should be teaching people how to code at a young age, because it's really no different from all these other hobbies that people have.
Thank you so
Okay,
much
so okay, sure, go ahead.
No, Bryn, go
Sorry.
ahead. I'll go after
Okay,
you, Bryn.
so okay, sure. So last question, the very last question. What advice could you give to someone who's interested to code but is intimidated of it?
Well, for me, it's kind of similar to the question a while ago. How I try to teach people how to code is that you need to focus on the computational thinking skills. And computational thinking is sort of the way that you approach programming, because it's very different from these other subjects, like I did say a while ago, for example, the way that programming is both an art and a science. So what you have to do is you have to approach logic and computational thinking skills first before you tackle, for example, big projects. Before you try to jump into programming, you can actually also try like small little logic puzzles once you feel more confident about logic skills, then you can jump right in. Although, you can really jump into programming languages anytime, and you can do small projects anytime. That's just for if you're intimidated, then you could try a few logic puzzles to sort of understand what programming is kind of about.
Thank you so much for this talk. I think that's the last of the questions, but I really want you to know that for me, as a person who can't code, this is really inspirational for me, and it really helped me understand that it's more of an art than a science, and it shouldn't be something that we should be intimidated of. I think a lot of people go to that stage where code is something imposing and terrifying and unapproachable, and I'm really grateful to have heard this talk and to have gained better perspectives on how it can be a hobby as much as it is something you do for school or for university or something like that. So I think just to end this, what's your last advice, I guess, to people out there who are coding or getting into code or even just here to start their journey into code? How would you advise them? What did you say to them going forward?
Sorry, I was typing something. Can you please repeat that? I'm sorry.
It's okay. I wanted to say that I'm really grateful for this talk, and I wanted to know what's your advice or encouragement for people who are starting out in code or continuing in code or just anywhere on their coding journey, what would you say to them, and what would you advise?
Well, what I would say to them is to sort of enjoy the journey of trying to learn and trying to fail so many times by making these projects. So like try to keep in mind that why you wanted to do programming in the first place. For me, it's because, and for me and for a lot of people, it's because we want to create things. We want to be an inventor in our own way. We want to bring our ideas to life. And if that works for you, then try to keep that in mind. Try to make small little projects. But if you're into stuff like learning how the algorithms in computer science work, or if you're more into these little logic puzzles, then by all means take your own path. Because programming is very much unguided, and yet at the same time, the fact that it's so unguided makes it really fun to do by yourself.
Thank you so much for this talk. Thank you for your time and for setting out this little hour before lunch to really engage us. I loved your PowerPoint. I loved the whole discussion, and I'm really grateful for this talk. Thank you so much. Thank you also to everyone who joined and everyone who came to watch. Thank you for supporting Develop and Irish. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, guys. I hope you all have a good lunch. Irish, it was such a pleasure to host you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. It was really a pleasure to be with you guys today.